Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, esteemed colleagues, and welcome to this morning's debate about lifelong learning, entitled Learning Anytime, Anywhere. My name is Graham Brown-Martin. I run an organisation from London, although it's a global organisation, called Learning Without Frontiers. In preparing for this debate, I found myself asking what we really meant by lifelong learning, for it seems to be a straightforward term, suggesting that we are all learners, constantly learning throughout our lives from the cradle to the grave. If learning is not a lifelong occupation, then at what point would it start or end? And when did learning ever not be lifelong? I'm reminded of the quote by Helen Keller, who said, "Life is a succession of lessons which must be lived to be understood." However, it was Gloria Steinem who said of learning, "The first problem for all of us, men and women, is not to learn, but to unlearn." Perhaps here Gloria is suggesting that after what we might call formal learning or education through our school and university systems, we must then unlearn as we face the realities and practicalities of life. Often lifelong learning is used as shorthand to mean adult learning or learning that takes place once one has completed formal education, perhaps in the workplace. And whilst I'm sure that there should be no doubt to include this learning, I'm not confident that the term should be limited in this way. And the title of the debate is indeed a clue for what we are talking about here. That is, learning that takes place at any time or any point in one's life and at any location. So this then suggests learning that is not only taking place throughout one's life, but beyond our formal learning institutions and wherever one may be, which suggests a variety of medium, from print to broadcast to personal device. It also suggests a blended approach to learning between these various media and locations, and also perhaps a rethinking of skills that are required in order to learn. We must also consider how we mix what the interface is between independent, self-directed learning and formal classroom-based learning. Naturally, with many things that appear straightforward, we discover that the seemingly innocent term of lifelong learning is more complex when we consider the formats of this learning, the provision of this learning, and the reasons or motivations behind this learning. As we move through life, are we seeking new skills? Are well-intentioned agencies and NGOs providing learning opportunities for specific purposes beyond simple reskilling? Is it purely about work? Is it cultural integration or assimilation? Are there other concerns that we should be aware of within the context of lifelong learning? So to help me and help us, I apologize, in this debate, I'm pleased to introduce our panel of experts who know far more about this subject than I do, who will each spend a few minutes, first of all, describing themselves, their background, relevant interests, and the context in which they're here, so that you can get an idea of where they're coming from. And in the next stage after that, I was asked a few questions to get the conversation and the debate going. But what's, in a sense, more important is that we then get your participation, because I'm aware that for the past couple of days there's been an awful lot of sitting in the audience and hearing things. I really want to have a, like almost try and get together around the table, as it were, to have a conversation with all of us, because I'm sure all of you have a lot to contribute to this discussion. So the first person I'd like to introduce is Dr. Francois Tedde from the Centre of Research and Interdisciplinary of Descartes University Paris. Excuse me, I've got a bit of a cold. Francois, if you could just introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself, that would be great.
Thank you, Graham. I think, I define myself as a learner that likes to learn anywhere, anytime. And, I've been learning enormously here in the last days, but I've been learning enormously from learners. The learners that are here, and they're going to have a very nice session around 1 just below the spider, so you're welcome to join them. But I've been learning all my life, actually, from younger people. And I think that I've learned more from the younger ones than from, my formal teachers. And what I've learned is that today you can indeed learn many more things, and very differently, okay? Because, the previous generations have been learning in one style, and the new generation is learning in a completely different style that they are constantly reinventing. And that's really what I've learned, and especially when I've met the young learners here, okay? And I'll talk more later about, what we do really in Paris, but it's really exactly the same thing, is helping learners design their own projects and co-construct knowledge individually and collectively. And that's really what we are after.
Thank you. And our next panelist former Minister of Education and Culture in Ecuador, and now Principal of Institute for Phronesis. Rosa, if you could tell us a little bit about yourself, just to kick us off. You need the microphone.
Okay. Well, I come from the Latin American context, which is a very different context, culturally, politically, socially, than the contexts many of you might be familiar with. I work globally for many years, but I concentrate on Latin America, my region. And for the past 15 years, I have been doing both research and action in the field of lifelong learning. I'm a firm believer that lifelong learning is or could be a paradigm shift, not just a buzzword. And I do believe that this concept should be adopted by countries in the South, so-called developing countries, in order to really reshape, redesign, rethink education and learning. I very often use the term learning, and I feel I'm abandoning sort of the term education because of the implications that this have. When you speak about education, people tend to think of schools, schooling, teachers, tests, etc. When you speak of learning, the picture gets a bit broader. So less and less I speak of education, more and more I'm speaking of learning.
And on our final panelist, last but no means least, Dr. Ruth Wallace, who leads the Centre for Social Partnerships in Lifelong Learning at Charles Darwin University in Australia's Northern Territory.
Thank you. I'm from the Northern Territory, which is in Northern Australia. That area has a very high population of Indigenous people, and most of my work is done around education for regional and remote areas. And the first thing I'd like to do is acknowledge the traditional owners, past, present and future, that I work with, and their vision for education that has been consistent over millennia, and our discussions about what that means and how we will bring learning into a perspective that incorporates different knowledge systems, different knowledge management systems, and different ways of representing knowledge. And I hope that their words are heard through my discussion today.